Media have an effect on a court trial. There you go. There you go. Oop, sorry. Yeah. You finished?
Yes.
No, you're not. Get working. Rem, bell ringer. Champion. All right, so what do we have here? Can media have an effect on a court trial? What do we think? What do we think? Matt, what do you got?
I'd say yes. Maybe the judge is the kind of person that listens to the media and all of the theories.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So maybe if maybe judge or the juror, right? The jury. Okay. So maybe if the jury is influenced by the media, right, there could be a sequester, right, where they could maybe be barred from any type of media coverage and prevent any type of biased opinions. Okay, good, good. What else do you have here, Jeffrey?
I said yes because of types of media like social media. If someone say posts a video of them actually with a murder weapon where they committed a murder, that could be used as evidence in a case trial.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Good job. Good job. So maybe with social media obviously having an effect with a trial, they could utilize it to benefit maybe his, her, I don't know, time in court just because of the use of evidence. Okay. Good. Good job. So evidence. Tanner, what do you have?
I said the same as them, but I added on it could affect someone's behavior in the courtroom.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. How so?
If they're not overly influenced, but if they're nervous because they are on the news and all that, they could screw up.
Yeah, it could definitely have an effect on the trial itself if maybe they know that maybe they're getting nervous or anxious about the court trial because it's being projected to a national audience, right? Good job, good job. Brock, what do you have?
So they shouldn't have an effect on the court trial, but it easily.
It could happen, right? It could happen. Yeah, in all reality, it'd be nice maybe just put media out of the, I guess you could say the air of the trial, but in all reality, we know that it could definitely play a role in maybe deciding the fate of someone, depending on media coverage and if it's biased or not. All right, good job, good job. So many trials out there that we can relate in modern time to think about how media could definitely play a role in the decision of a court case or the effect of it. So what could occur or happen after a trial depending on the media coverage. All right, so let's get the terms for today. Got that. There we go. So we're going to refer to the book today quite a bit, especially with your assignment. So make sure you have that ready to go then. You can use the online textbook that I have on Canvas, or if you have one underneath your desk, which some of you do, some of you, maybe not. I think I have it online. Yeah, I have it online. All right, so we have prior restraint, sequester, gag order, shield laws. There we go. All right, so what do you have? Prior restraint. What do we got? Terrence, what do you have for prior restraint?
A form of censorship that allows the government to review the content of printed materials and prevent their publication.
Okay, all right. So the government has the ability to review the information before it's presented to the public. All right, good, good. And why do you think that's necessary? Do you think it is? Do you think it's right that the government has the ability to censor information before it's publicized, before it's presented to the public? What do we think here? Tanner, go ahead.
If it's to stop like mass hysteria from breaking out,
Oh.
like a mass wave of fear.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so paranoia, fear. Good, good, good. All right, what else? Jeffrey, do you have something to say?
It is limited in the powers that they have due to the First Amendment, but it also is necessary due to, like you said, not wanting to cause mass hysteria as well as a fair presentation.
Okay, yeah, good job, good job. So in some cases, the United States government has the ability to censor this information before it gets out to the public. It doesn't happen often, and the Supreme Court actually ruled against the government in many ways of trying to censor information. And one we'll talk about today with the New York Times versus the United States in the 1970s with the Vietnam War. And how many governors, how many really represented officials were discussing information about the war and trying to present a different opinion, a different perception of the war. And they call it the Pentagon Papers. Information leaked out to the New York Times. They presented the material, and the government was trying to obviously pull that back. They're like, "Oh, we didn't want this to get out just yet. We didn't want to talk about these discussions, these topics in the newspapers publicly to people just yet." So, with prior restraint, yeah, the government in some cases to try to prevent any type of hysteria or paranoia, they can have the ability to review this information before it's presented. But in many cases, it's not, it doesn't happen, right? The Supreme Court frowns upon it, right? And so does really everybody else, obviously. This information should be out to the public. It shouldn't be hidden by the government. All right, Rem, you got that? You sure? Okay. What about you, Taylor? You got that? All right. Hopefully you're not on your phone back there. Okay. Sequester, what do we have? Jamie, what do you have for sequester?
Sustained illegal possession of assets over that has been paid.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what about in the dealings of, let's say, a court here? A court here. Jeffrey?
Refers to the automatic spending cuts that occur with withdrawal funding for certain government programs, particularly pertaining to the court system as well as the judicial system.
All right. So with sequester, this is in many cases to try to keep media away from the jurors, okay, because they're making a decision on a trial. We'll talk another important trial today, where if media is being projected to the jurors about a certain topic or a perspective of view about that trial, then that could alter their opinion, right? And that will make it an unfair trial for, let's say, the defendant, okay, let's say for that person. So to make sure that there is a fair trial, media is not really projected to these jurors because they want to make sure everything's fair. It's their amendment, right? Their constitutional right to have a fair trial. And if the media plays a huge role in this and tried in many cases, maybe altering the view of the jurors, this could cause a huge problem. Right, man? Yeah. So to try to prevent that, court could sequester, okay, or maybe push out media from the influence to these jurors, or make them and keep them isolated for a short time period until the trial is over. Does that make sense? Okay. Very hard to do, obviously, nowadays with social media. It's very difficult to keep some of these viewpoints away because you can just literally tap on your phone and there it is, right? There it is. All right, what about a gag order? What's a gag order? What do we have here? What do we have? Rem, go ahead. Okay, all right, yeah. So in some court cases, especially at the federal level, they could push all media out of the involvement of a court case or a trial, okay, without of the courtroom. Why do you think it's important to try to keep media out of the courtroom? In some cases, some are actually broadcast nationwide, and everybody sees every decision, every word said. but in some cases they try to refer away from that. What do you think? Madden, go ahead.
People like with words and stuff.
Okay, twisting words. Okay. What about just media from the courtroom itself? Like just totally taking them out. Some cases you only see paintings or drawings of what's maybe occurring, and you hear obviously hearsay of what was said or what was discussed. Tanner?
It could lead to like some sort of like, I want to say riot in response to it, if it's like a monumental case. that
Okay.
involves- I'll just, as an example, like maybe with the BLM protests, with cases on that, like the Derek Chauvin case that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, good job. Good job. So trying to keep media out of the courtroom as much as possible to try to prevent any type of chaos, right? And if, like you were saying before, they might feel under pressure. They might not be able to give the right perspective of the matter of the account if the media is constantly snapping pictures or in that person's face with cameras, right? Okay, good. Jeffrey, you have something else to add to that?
Gag orders are usually ordered only by court or government. It's usually not ordered by a small court such as local court, usually as a state court or national court.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good job. Good job. So again, trying to keep the media out of the court dealings, and we'll talk another one with Shepard versus Maxwell. This man was accused. Well, he did actually murder his wife, but it was unfortunate, obviously. But this guy kind of got away with murder in a way, and the reason for is because there's so much press involved with this trial that they looked back at it and said, you know what, he actually didn't have a fair trial. There's so much media involved in the courtroom that it prevented him to have a fair trial because there's constant pictures, constant cameras rolling, people in the audience that were uproaring about certain things that were said in the courtroom. And the judge said, you know what, this wasn't fair at all. Like he didn't have the ability to defend himself. And they kind of overturned it. He was set free. It was weird, crazy thing. But again, with media, they could definitely have an effect on the courtroom. And a lot of people today with, I don't even know how to pronounce her name, Giselle Maxwell, the Epstein trial. You guys know what I'm talking about. Maybe you heard a little bit about it. You really don't hear too much information about it. And a lot of people are concerned. It's like, oh, this is something that should be projected to the people with this, sex trafficking and, things like that with Epstein and many political figures, high ranking officials, elites in American society and world society. And it's like, oh, well, why isn't there media about it? Well, one thing is because of a gag order, right? Because of trying to prevent the hysteria of the media within this trial. All right, shield laws. What do we got? What do we got? Shield laws. Brock, what do you have for shield laws?
Provide journalists with an absolute ballpark privilege to expose those.
Yeah, good job. So reporters that are presenting information for, let's say, the news or for the press, whatever, they don't have to reveal their sources. Okay. In some cases they do, but for the most part, this is to try to protect their sources that are being presented to them. And this is maybe information, evidence that might be found. It's like, oh, well, how do you get that evidence? Well, you don't need to know, right? We have the evidence here. It's try to protect those people that are reporting the information and have the evidence themselves. For shield laws, maybe, for instance, like a whistleblower. You guys ever hear that before? So whistleblower might be someone that is presenting the information, is going under this alias whistleblower because they're the ones who found the evidence, found the information of maybe wrongdoing at the political level, and they want to just make sure that person's protected so that they're not maybe attacked, okay, for presenting this information for a trial or a hearing. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys ever see the movie Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal? It's really good. It's on Netflix. Do you ever see it? Did you? That's a really good movie, isn't it?
It's okay.
What do you mean it's okay?
It's okay.
Oh, okay. So it's pretty much about a reporter that goes to a journalist, cameraman. He goes all around to these crimes that happen. And towards the end, he's really trying to get the best view. He's trying to get the best film for these really newspaper journalists and TV promotions. And at the end, he kind of alters with evidence and gets involved in some shady stuff, which is pretty cool. Talks a lot about this freedom of press and how shield laws can be in effect to try to protect his characters his name. All right, real quick, I want to go through this information. I'll let you guys work on the assignment for today. So freedom of the press. So obviously, when the Constitution was written, founding fathers had no idea about the way technology would advance society. So obviously with computers, with social media, with emails, okay, television, internet, you name it, right? All this stuff, all this sources of news, sources of information. How do you try to censor it? How do you try to protect the public from these new forms of media? Well, it's hard to do, right? It's hard to do. And again, it's one of those things where how do you censor these new forms of media? Well, it's tough. It's hard. And Facebook constantly in the news about censoring information and how that might cause some issues for them, depending on what type of information they're presenting, what type of information maybe they're presenting to the people, if it's false, if there's evidence that's proving these matters. And anymore, you see on Twitter or Facebook or social media, these fact checkers at the bottom. That's just a way to try to prevent people from just reading the title of the article and just going with it without any evidence, without any further research into the topic. So that's kind of why you see that anymore on Facebook or Twitter, just to show a viewpoint and what there is really about it. All right, so the FCC, the Federal Communication Commissions, created obviously right after radio, as these new forms of technology are being broadcast all across the country. Right, obviously applies to television, applies to emails, applies to the internet, social media. Okay, and this is the way to try to censor information to audiences. So Turner Broadcasting System, FCC, as television cable was becoming bigger and bigger, no longer was television just being broadcasted. Okay, this is actually connecting the people with news, with information. Okay, and the FCC is there to try to censor that. Okay, that's why you always see at the before, let's say a show or a movie, viewer discretion is advised, right? And some of these shows and movies are presented at odd times to make sure and prevent children from watching it, because this could affect their development. It could affect their behavior. So that's why you see that, the disclaimer before any type of movies or shows. The ratings, rated R, PG-13, G, you name it. This is all appearing really because of media, all because of movies, shows, internet, okay, all really coming about fairly new, fairly recent. You guys good with the FCC here? Good? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just move to obscenity here. Okay, so again, it's important for these productions to have some sort of disclaimer to present to the people before a show is obviously presented, a movie's presented to the people, to know exactly what they're getting themselves into. A lot of times you see the rating and you see a description behind the rating explaining what might be shown. Maybe it is vulgar language, maybe it is nudity, right? Maybe it's sexual content, right? That is why it's displayed, to present and protect the viewers before it's shown. So Miller versus California, this was an interesting court case, and this is really up to the communities, up to the local communities to decide whether or not this movie is appropriate for its audience. All right, we all know that it's not every area around the country, it's dependent, obviously, with their community members of what is obscene, what is obviously okay, justified to show. It's not New York City's ability to try to see if exactly what's, what's rated for people to watch in Pennsylvania or in California or in Texas. Right. So with Miller versus California, this is really just trying to explain that local communities have the ability to show and present information, present movies or shows to their audiences to try to protect them. Lately, though, it's just kind of been nationalized, right? Lately, it's just been projected because with social media, everybody's connected so quick with things. it's really hard to censor that information. And it's more at a national level anymore. All right, you guys good with that? Miller versus California. Okay. So we'll talk about shield laws here. Again, protecting these reporters, protecting where they're getting their information from. Okay. And how this is, in many cases, their ability to write these articles, protect their sources. Okay. So they're not constantly questioned, or maybe even, in the worst case, hunted down because of the information they're presenting about a certain trial. I don't want that to happen. All right, so shield laws, again, confidential information or sources. Okay, this is the evidence that's presented. Okay, this is a way to try to protect these people, these sources, for the information that they gather, the evidence that they gather. Okay. And some being very personal, obviously. It might be just what's on social media. It might be, okay, in some cases, their scheduling, right, where they work, what they do, maybe their connections, their friends, their family, right, their relationships. Try to protect these reporters, try to protect these people that are collecting this evidence. It's usually not presented. It's usually not presented. Again, that's all that shield laws is. You already have that vocab term down, so I'm just going to keep moving on. Prior restraint, we already mentioned that. So censorship of information before it's presented to the public. Okay, so is the government's ability to try to limit or censor this type of articles or journalism before it's presented to the public. Again, a lot of it's just to protect the people, protect from any type of anarchy, chaos, maybe revolts or rebellions on the streets. So Neer versus Minnesota, this was a court case that actually the Supreme Court ruled against the government in censoring this information. In this case here, there were publications that were describing the mayor of Minnesota, the mayor of a larger city in Minnesota, the governor of Minnesota, describing them as gangsters and a part of a mob, a part of the gang. Okay, and at the time of the 1920s, 1930s, the mafia was huge. Right, Jeffrey?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Gangs and mafia. So these gangs and mafias, and they're saying that these political officials, these public officials, were no different. So what do you think, the governor, what do you think these governmental officials were saying? Well, we need to censor this information. We're not allowed to have this leaked out to the public because we can't have this perception of us being associated with gangsters, right? This isn't right. But in many cases, Supreme Court ruled against it and said, you know what? They have the freedom to present this information. And depending on what evidence they have of maybe this association of gangsters, then yeah, maybe. Obviously, we mentioned last chapter about defamation of character, right? We talked about slander, we talked about libel. And yeah, it could be to that extent, right? Where it could be limited. But in this court case, well, the reporters had the ability to write about this information and depict these government officials as gangsters and mobsters, a part of the mafia. So that just goes to show that the government just can't censor everything that is presented to you. All right, so this is what I was talking about, the Pentagon Papers. Okay, so reaffirming Neer versus Minnesota in 1931, the government was trying to crack down on what was being presented to the people about the Vietnam War. Okay, and what was disclosed information, but once it was leaked out, the government tried to halt all publication, all printing of this information to the American public. So as they're trying to do that, well, it's got brought to the Supreme Court pretty quick. Only 10 days. Usually it takes a couple of years, but 10 days, that's all it took for the Supreme Court to take up this issue. And well, they allowed the reporting of this information. Okay, they allowed the presentation of what was occurring of the Vietnam War to the American public. And the reason for it was because of a viewpoint, a perspective, and how the government officials were trying to paint a different picture a different perspective of the Vietnam War. And a lot of it because this was such a critiqued war. A lot of people were not for it whatsoever. And many government officials were trying to present the picture of why we're involved, the importance of being involved. And some of the information that leaked out really didn't go along with their narrative. So government tried to shut it down, and New York Times continued to publish it, and Supreme Court ruled in favor of the New York Times. You guys good with New York? Yeah, New York Times here. So again, they call out the Pentagon Papers because this is the information that was leaked out about the Vietnam War. Actually viewed in favor of New York Times. All right, so last one here I want to talk about, Shepard versus Maxwell. This was the court case like I was talking about. He killed his wife, the murder, and it was actually presented, looked back on about this press because the press involved in the court case, in the courtroom, and how this wasn't giving Shepard much of a fair trial because the constant picture taking, the constant media in the courtroom, and really everywhere he went, jurors were having somewhat of a perspective against him. So with the juror selection, it was difficult for him to find anybody that was unbiased about the charges, okay, the trial itself. So the judge had to come up with a decision to try to figure out what he was going to do with this court ruling to try to give him a fair trial. And he had to kind of drop the charges because it wasn't fair. It went against his constitutional freedoms. This one, obviously extreme, but it just goes to show how media can play a huge effect in a trial and making it hard for someone to present for their goodwill, right? For their perspective. And we already talked about sequestered, so keeping isolated, the jurors isolated for a short time until the trial is over. Again, trying to make sure that their perspective isn't altered or it's changed. A gag order by a judge barring the press from publicizing this information on a pending court case. Again, maybe changing a narrative or presenting a narrative that might not be projected in the courtroom, or that might cause some issues to the court hearing itself. All right, is there any questions on that, guys? Good. All right, I'm going to post the assignment tomorrow. I know we're winding down here in time, so I don't want to give you guys homework for that. I'm going to post that tomorrow. You're going to analyze a lot of these court cases that we went over and some in the book that I didn't get to mention, and find some of the court rulings and court hearings about these certain decisions here with prior restraint, sequester, gag order, you name it.